Good evening, hello and welcome. You're watching The Nation at 5. I'm Anusha Sonia. Top focus. The judgment that came from the Supreme Court of India, a judgment that was much anticipated and awaited in this country, where the LGBTQ community was demanding marriage equality, the right to have legal sanctity to same-sex marriages in India. A debate ensued both inside and outside the court, and with a bated breath, we were all looking forward to this judgment. With a unanimous view, the Supreme Court upheld that right to marriage is not a fundamental right. By 3-2, the Supreme Court also held that any kind of civil partnerships cannot be recognized in India. Neither can the same-sex couples be allowed to adopt as a couple. Individually, they can. The Chief Justice of India, at least as far as these two aspects are concerned, is in the minority. He holds that some kind of civil partnerships should be regulated and allowed in India, while the government of the day has the final say on the matter. The government or the legislative domain is the right authority to decide in what shape and form can same-sex marriages be regulated here in India. But the fact that it has been argued that and accepted that marriage is not a fundamental right indeed is a setback to the petitioners. They had expected a lot to come from the Supreme Court, but it seems if you look at the judgment and the sum and substance of the judgment, most of the arguments that were advanced by Solicitor General Mr. Tushar Mehta, the central government, have been accepted by the apex court. Cutting across to our legal correspondent Ananya Bhatnagar, he's joining us live. Ananya, the petitioners are clearly disappointed. What kind of reactions you've tracked through the day?
Well, definitely, we also spoke to the lead petitioners in this case who seem to be disappointed, Anusha, with the verdict that has come in from the Supreme Court. They were very hopeful since the May 11 when the judgment was reserved. Everybody had their eyes on India's topmost court of the country. But they were of opinion that, though the judgment might be a little disappointing, but this would open avenues of debate. This would open debates on gender neutrality and would also spread awareness about gender neutrality, as also stated by in fact, the Chief Justice of India in its judgment. But very importantly, Anusha, I would like to read down the statement that is now coming from the Solicitor General of India, Mr. Tushar Mehta, who wholeheartedly welcomes the verdict that is coming from the topmost court of the country. And I'll quote that: I wholeheartedly welcome the judgment. I'm happy that my stand is accepted. All four judgments have been taken, jurisprudence in question of nation and intellectual exercise which went into writing the judgment at the next level. There are very few courts in the world where one can, expect the level of intellectual and scholar judicial exercise. The judgment would be read across jurisdictions. Today's judgment is balance the interests of individuals with the interests of a civil society as well. He also goes on to say that this judgment would be a very, very crucial one whenever separation of powers would be discussed, because it is upheld the separation of powers there and it basically balances out the functions that the parliament, the executive and in fact the judiciary does. It's the statement that is coming from the Solicitor General of India, one of the topmost law officers of the country, very, very clearly welcoming this particular judgment. Though this judgment has, not granted legal recognition to the same-sex marriages, though it has not granted adoption right to the queer couples, but at the end of the day, it opens up avenues for discussions on gender neutrality, on awareness about gender neutrality, and also legally speaking, this judgment would be a landmark one when it comes to the separation of powers being dealt with, and also the jurisprudence would be something that would be read across the world.
I go back to the judgment of 2013 when homosexuality, the Delhi High Court judgment was overturned and homosexuality was once again criminalized in India, and the homosexuals were called the unconvicted felons. Cut to 2018 judgment when there was an unconditional apology that was rendered by the Supreme Court. It's quite a fascinating legal history if you read the struggle of LGBTQ rights here in India. Mr. Sanjay Ghosh, senior advocate, is joining us on the broadcast. Good evening, Mr. Ghosh. Pleasure to have you on the show, and we speak on a very important day. A landmark ruling has come in, though the petitioners are very disappointed. First, your initial comments on what the Supreme Court has laid down today.
Good evening, Anusha. Thanks for having me. Well, I would say that I'm quite disappointed because I really expected the Supreme Court, this was uncharted territory, and I really expected the Supreme Court to go much, much beyond what they have gone. But that having been said, let's also celebrate the fact that all the judges have unanimously recognized that the rights of people who maybe belong to the same sex, other than the heterosexual couples, also have a right to aspire to be united in unions and associations. So it is not all that negative. It is a long road ahead. Maybe we were expecting that there would be miracles, But these are small steps, baby steps on the way. So let's not be totally dejected and disappointed.
You sound a note of optimism, and I've heard that coming in from a lot of legal stalwarts like you, saying that look, we shouldn't be thoroughly disappointed. But one facet I want to talk to you about: what do you think is at the core of the reasoning? And I know we are awaiting a written copy of that judgment to come out, and whatever we have heard in that roughly about 1.5 hours, the court read that judgment. They spoke about the domain of the legislature. They spoke about what Parliament is supposed to do, what government is supposed to do, and they cannot get into it. Was it merely the mammoth task that was at hand, that over 100 laws needed to be changed, and that is why the Supreme Court shied away? Because one question that I heard very often today in the newsroom, Mr. Ghosh, is that the court has overstepped this line multiple times to do the right thing. Why couldn't they do it this time?
Well, as you rightly framed it, it was the battle between an activist court and a conservative court. So people who were wanting same-sex marriage rights were actually pressing for the court to be a little activist in its approach. And as you rightly said, when it came to sexual harassment in Vishaka's case, when it came to corruption in Vineet Narayan's case, the court has, in the absence of law, in the absence of legislation, laid down certain guidelines, directions, and has actually set the ball rolling for finally legislation to come. So therefore, in this case also, the petitioners, I think, were hoping that pending a legislation, the courts would give some kind of recognition and directions, and there the court fell short. The other side, I mean, just to give you a balanced view, and as you rightly highlighted it, the other side pointed out to the court that this is not a simple one-off case like sexual harassment or corruption where you just set up a CVC or you set guidelines for an internal complaints committee. You are talking about marriage. So then there would be various repercussions on inheritance, on succession, on adoption. So these would require a detailed application of mind. And in fact, if you remember, as you rightly said, we are still awaiting the judgment. The devil lies in the details. But right, during the hearings which were live streamed, we heard the court putting this to the counsels for the petitioners, saying that, what about these other nuances? And the petitioner said, okay, first you declare us that we have a right to her civil union, and then every time we have a problem, we'll come back to you. But I think that was not accepted by the majority of the judges. And they felt that it is better to, defer to the will of the executive and ask the government to form some sort of a committee and to, fast track legislation. But let me tell you, there is a disadvantage there, because we know that while the government must be complimented when it came to transsexuals, the Supreme Court did in the Nalsa's case pass directions, and the government has the transgender. The government has taken the issue of transgender forward. There is a legislation, and we see actively the rights of transgender people being recognized. Right. But still, when it comes to homosexuality and when it comes to legalizing civil unions, I don't know whether we can actually completely depend on just passing the buck to the parliament, because we know how it functions. Politics and other considerations are at play. The government's opposition, not only on the idea of the powers of the legislature as opposed to the judiciary, but also opposition to the concept of a heteronormative marriage being challenged, gives you a peek into how the government of the day will actually consider these kind of amendments.
Yeah. I also want to get your attention to a broader issue here, which in my understanding is missed out in this entire discussion, is the broader context and the complexity of the family law here in India. Nowhere across the democratic world you have a parallel regime of personal laws operating, plus the so-called secular laws like the Special Marriage Act or various other statutes or religious codes that have been codified, like the Hindu Marriage Act and various other laws. Personal laws, the complexity around it, its interaction with the so-called secular laws, is that complexity one of the reasons why the court couldn't bite the bullet? The fact that we don't have a common civil code in this country, how much of that is an intrinsic underlying factor in your learned understanding?
Well, to be fair, the petitioners were very clear. They did not want the personal laws interfered with. They simply said the Special Marriages Act, which is which governs without any religion, without any region or language, should be amended, or rather judicially read down to allow even civil unions between same-sex couples. So therefore, in fact, the issue of personal laws, while it is definitely the elephant in the room, in this case, the petitioners were not asking for that to be interfered with. But let's also be very clear, the mandate of the Constitution under Article 44 is that there has to be a uniform civil code. Right. And in various aspects, over time, from the British days onwards, wherever in public interest there has been secular legislation enacted, like for example, Section 125 of the CRPC, which gives maintenance to all women, there the understanding is very clear that the personal law will have to cede that space and the secular law has to step in. So if the court was bold enough to actually allow civil unions, I don't think the bogey or the ghost of personal laws would come in the way. It's just that the Supreme Court did not, take that bold step forward.
I'm afraid we're losing your audio just a bit, but my last question to you, and I'll attempt to ask that question hoping that you can hear me. You said if the court was bold enough to bite that bullet, that bogey or the ghost of personal laws wouldn't really have come in the way. Interesting argument to make, but for the times to come, how hopeful are we? If history is to go by anything, I mean, if that's the precedent that we look at, that the Supreme Court can reverse its own judgment in a curative petition like it happened in the case of decriminalization of homosexuality, do you think that there is hope for greater civil rights for the LGBTQIA community for the times to come from the judicial corridors?
Of course, there are no full stops in life, and tomorrow is another day. So I would say, don't be disappointed. It is a fight. You've fought well. Now get your courage and everything ready to fight the bigger fight, the long fight.
Well, we hope that this long fight of greater civil rights continue. Mr. Ghosh, always a pleasure. Thank you so much for sparing time. Thank you so much for joining us here on CNN News 18. That was Mr. Sanjay Ghosh, senior advocate, putting out his view. And most of the legal experts have said, senior lawyers have argued that yes, the community did not get what it wanted. Maybe the legal ground wasn't tilled enough. We were not ready. The court did not bite that bullet. But it's not over. These are only the steps that you have to take in the larger cause of greater civil rights for the LGBTQIA community. This fight will continue. We got a lot of reactions through the day. Listen in.
So you all were the petitioners. In this case, there were certain things that you all had asked for before the court, and we've seen that there has been extensive verdict, a 2-hour-long order that was passed by the bench of Chief Justice Chandrachud. Sir, what are your takeaways? And as a petitioner, was it what you all had really expected, or what has been the stance of the community on this?
So, I mean, to be very honest, the petition was like an ask for marriage equality rights for the LGBTQ plus community. What has come out, I mean, it was such a long verdict that we are still trying to interpret the outcome of it. But basically what we notice is that they are talking about civil union partnerships between same-sex couples. They are talking about setting up a committee, but that would happen through the parliament. Now, civil unions, if the process is going to be through a committee, through the parliament, it can be a fairly long process. So we are hoping that the government will act faster.
So what was it that you had petitioned for, and how do you infer the whole judgment that's come out of Supreme Court's bench?
What we had actually asked was not for same-sex marriage, but we had asked for equal marriage equality rights, because same-sex really excludes transgenders and other minorities of the LGBTQ spectrum. So we had asked for marriage equality rights. What the judgment is out right now is still a little unclear, and we are waiting for our lawyers to decipher and kind of break it down for us, so we could clearly understand what has been granted to us and what has been held back. So overall there is a lack of clarity, because there are certain judges who are for it, there are certain judges who are not for certain things. What is clearly come across is that the heterosexual transgenders have got the right to marry. Adoption is still a question mark, and there are certain recommendations which are very positive, but overall the judgment is a little disappointing. The idea was to get equal rights, basically. We are not asking for anything special to us. We had asked for equal rights which any other citizen of the country is entitled to.
रेशमा जी, कैसे देखती हैं इस पूरे जजमेंट को? सुप्रीम कोर्ट ने कहा है कि जो मैरिज है वो फंडामेंटल राइट नहीं है। इसका मतलब ये है कि सेम सेक्स मैरिज जो है वो वैलिडेट नहीं होती है।
ट्रांसजेंडर व्यक्तियों के लिए उन्होंने सोचा, इसके लिए हम उनको धन्यवाद देती हैं, लेकिन जो यौनिक अल्पसंख्यक व्यक्ति हैं उनके लिए भी सोचने की आवश्यकता है कि वो अपने अधिकारों को किस तरीके से बचाए रख सकते हैं और उनके वजूद की लेकर के कि अगर कोई भी व्यक्ति अपने साथी के साथ में रहते हैं तो उनके शादी के अधिकार, जीने का अधिकार, उनके बच्चे पालने का अधिकार, ये सारे अधिकार सुरक्षित हों। तो ये सबसे ज़्यादा ज़रूरी है कि आप कैसे यौनिक अल्पसंख्यक और लैंगिक अल्पसंख्यक साथियों के बारे में सोचते हैं। तो निश्चित तौर पे जब ये समझ बढ़ेगी तो निश्चित तौर पे इस जजमेंट में भी बदलाव होगा और ये अनवरत चलने वाली प्रक्रिया है और हम अभी निराशा में नहीं हैं। हम ज़रूर इस सिक्योरिटी पिटिशन, इसके बाद आने वाले पिटिशन्स में लगातार प्रयास करते रहेंगी कि उनके जजमेंट्स आएँ और इसके अलावा हम अपने पॉलिटिकल स्ट्रक्चर में भी इस तरीके से पुशबैक करेंगे कि आप इसको समझें और इसको लेकर के स्वीकार्यता के दर को आगे बढ़ाएं।
Watch the screening, the judgment is out. Are you satisfied with the judgment? What do you have to say regarding this?
I'm really satisfied. I want to respect the judgment of the Constitution bench. Such interpretation from the constitutionality perspective has given us so much of hopes and vibes to be part of the system of society. I think if you keenly observe this judgment is warmly welcoming, especially from the context of two things. One, the transgender rights marriage has been upheld by the Constitution bench. The second thing is also about framing any sort of law, especially in the context of the marriage laws are concerned for the same sexuality members of this community. It's about the business of the legislators, and these legislators, and how the legislators are functioning from the context of it's an urban elite issue. We need not to worry about this community, and please leave it to the parliament when we will decide. And I want to question back to those leaders: why should we leave it to the parliament?
And also, a committee is being formed by the cabinet secretary to be formed as per the judgment. What do you have to say regarding this whole issue?
I think that's a good suggestion. I think that's a good observation, or it's a good recommendation. I would say that. I think many legislators doesn't know what is sex, what is gender, what is sexuality, and they are really not in the process of learning what exactly they're trying to say. Many times they do so much of mistakes. So I think being quite cautious, I think under the chairmanship of or chairwomanship of the cabinet secretary, it should speak the politics of inclusivity. When I say the politics of inclusivity means the social sector, the emotional sector, the medical sector, the legal sector, the community experts who are in field. I think community representatives should be at most in the committee.
What do you really think, of the order that's come forth today? Because this entire verdict was in fact about a family, and you all are the family for, the community.
Right. We were thinking it will be legalized, then we can have that, family set up where children are there, adopted children probably. But that things didn't happen, but other rights are granted, so we have to rest on that happiness case. Some rights are granted, but still it is missing. We will be missing that family look, So, hoping they're taking baby steps. At least we have come this far. It will take a few more years. It will be recognized. Right from the beginning, they have been saying that it is not the courts who make these laws, and it is in the parliament. And we know what is parliament. They are all bothered about the kursi and vote bank and all that. So how far it will be recognized there? It will take time. Maybe in 5 years or so, it will come into force. Let's see.
I think the parents have to support a child, because when the parents support is the foremost. The first support is parents support, because if your own parents don't support you, why will society will think about you? Society is ever ready to pounce on you. So parent support is very, very important, and with that support, the LGBTQ children, they shine more, they come out with the flying colors, because they are more confident when they get the parents' support. They don't have to hide their faces, because they know if anything goes wrong, my parents are there to support me.
Do you feel it's a complex judgment? Do you welcome the judgment?
It's undoubtedly complex judgment because the 4 judgments which are there in this entire and the judges read it out for almost 2.5 hours. And but what underlies the complexity of the judgments is a certain unity. When Justice Chandrachud began by reading the judgment, he said we're all united on some points. What we differ on is how far we're going to go with respect to protecting the rights of the LGBTQ community. So that's the point which we greatly welcome. Again, if you notice the language, what we heard from the judges just speaking, the level of comfort with the word queer, the word lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, that's a sea change. So we've seen a judiciary, at least this bench, which is highly supportive of the rights of the queer community.
So the judgment says that they have to form a committee under the cabinet secretary. So once again, the ball is in the central government, the legislature. So what do you have to say about this regarding this whole issue? And you also taking a look back at the whole arguments and of the government as well.
Yeah. Even the fact of the government agreed and constituted a committee was a result of, I think, the pressure put by the court. Initially, the government's entire position of the Solicitor General is that there's a preliminary objection. This is a matter for Parliament to decide. The judiciary shouldn't even be hearing this matter. The judiciary should not be hearing the matter. That's the initial position that they took forward. The second position they took forward, it's an elite issue. It's an issue which concerns a couple of elite gay, lesbian and bisexual people. It's not a concern of the vast majority of people in this country. From that, they came down to saying that we'll constitute a committee, which shows that they realized.
Well, we'll continue tracking that story. All the voices here on CNN News 18. For now, we are slipping into a very short break. Stay tuned, stay with us.
They're getting ready for that. So the minute we'll know that the operation or the war is over, then we can start with the recovery piece.
Or few days?
We don't know. I think everybody's kind of preparing us for at least a month. Yeah.
So thank you, Eric, for talking to us.
Much.
And it may take probably few months before situation would go back to normal. And situation has been pretty bad. We have seen all around the city, the blood-soaked streets, houses, they have been left like that, cars burned. Behind me you could see there was a police station that used to be here. And what is left of this police station is all that a small puddle of water and rubbles. Those were removed from the site, just days before. Now the entire city, it looks ghostly. The cars that were attacked and they were actually, totally damaged. People at home shot dead. It was a day of rest. People are not very hopeful about how soon the normalcy will return in the city, but they do hope that probably it will take few weeks or few months before the situation could be as safe and secure that people who have fled from the city would be returning back to their home. Meanwhile, the entire city and the perimeter of the city has been taken over by the Israeli Defense Forces, tanks, artilleries being fired, Israeli jets also flying over Gaza and dropping ammunition or missiles targeting Hamas locations. 2,400 or more than that people in Palestine, in Gaza, they have also been killed. Swiftly shifting towards the humanitarian crisis that is emerging in the Gaza Strip because of the number of casualties that has been going on there. Humanitarian crisis that has emerged, food supplies shortage, medical supplies shortage, doctors having been killed, children having been killed. So the gory images of Israeli, Israeli tragedy, and that is where the balance of geopolitics remains. We'll have to see whether the Israeli offensive will continue on the Gaza Strip or the diplomacy will take center stage, and there will. We are in Sderot, and this was the place which was worst hit during the 7th October terrorist attack by Hamas people. We are joined by Erith, and she will explain the kind of situation that is currently in city. Okay, so first to just give you some idea, we are still standing on the splattered blood remains, and this is a safe house that was probably also attacked, and many people were dragged out of this house and killed summarily. So how would you describe the situation in the city currently?
So right now we have about 4,000 to 5,000 people that stayed in the city. The rest of them have been evacuated, and they're living either with family outside of Sderot or in hotels. the government and the city, really, the city is providing for them, making sure that they have everything that they need, from mental health support to clothing and food and provisions and anything that they need. And right now we're trying to take care of also, we have people on the ground from the municipality in every hotel and trying to see if there are any needs that come up, and whatever people need, we're taking care of.
So we know that on 7th of October there was total rampage and mayhem that was done by the terrorists.
Right.
I mean, if you could describe how the situation in the town on that day, how did it all
So what
all
happened
start?
that day?
Yes, of
So
course.
really, it's 6 o'clock in the morning. Sirens went off, and when sirens go off, people here know to go into the shelters. Because it was a holiday, people were supposed to be walking, to synagogues that morning, and it's a Saturday. But because of the sirens, people weren't on the streets, thankfully. Because the minute that happened, we had a few jeeps. I do not know if it was 3 or 4 jeeps, heavily equipped with military and equipment, guns, explosives, you name it. And they just went through town, through the main street, and then they separated into a few streets. One of them came to the police station that we see the remainings of right here, and they took over the police station, and the rest of them were just going around town and killing anyone that they could. Anyone. People were shot in their cars. There was a minibus here with people that were going on a trip for the day. They shot all of them, all 13 people in the cars. They were just running around trying to kill people as they go. The police, the minute the police was able to do something, they did. The minute our security team, the minute they heard anything, gunshots, whatever that was, they put their gear on and they went to the streets to actually look for these terrorists and to have some kind of a face-to-face with them so they can finish them off. But it was brutal. They came very prepared. They knew exactly what they were doing. And the minute they got a hold of the police station, they got the higher ground, and there was a sniper or 2 snipers on the top of the building, and they were really killing anybody around you. Now you can see this is a populated area, so people were stuck in their homes.
Elith, how many hours it took the security forces actually before they could take control of the city entirely?
So it took a long time, because you have to understand the army was surprised as well, and the army was on fighting the front line of the kibbutzim and the moshavim right there. So really in Sderot, by the time we got the help and by the time we got a hold of the situation, roughly 36 hours, which is a very long time to be home and scared. I got a lot of calls from people calling me and saying there are gunshots by my window, there are gunshots in the streets, not knowing if it's soldiers or if it's Hamas. So it was very, very scary.
With the kind of city and the situation, how soon do you think the city can go back to normal, people can come back and they will live?
Listen, I'm not a prophet and I have no idea what the government is planning. I do know one thing, that the mayor of the city is already planning ahead, and they understand that in order for us to be able to recover, the minute the military operation ends, we have to be prepared for our people. And we're going to do anything and everything that we need to in order to do that. So we're raising funds right now to be able to rebuild our homes. There's so many homes that have been hit, about 74 direct hits into people's homes. Some people have nowhere to go back to, right? So we're going to be able to rebuild it. We're going to be able to give them what they need when it comes to mental health professionals that are in town, anything and everything. And right now they're getting ready for that. So the minute we'll know that the operation or the war is over, then we can start with the recovery piece.
A few days?
We don't know. I think everybody's kind of preparing us for at least a month. Yeah.
So thank you, Eric, for talking
you
to
very
us.
much.
And it may take probably few months before situation would go back to normal. And situation has been pretty bad. We have seen all around the city, the blood-soaked streets, houses, they have been left.
Welcome back, and we continue to keep our focus on that crucial judgment that came from the Supreme Court of India today. Let's cut across to this breaking bit of information that we are getting for you. The order copy is out. The judgment copy is out. It's a 366-page long judgment. And as the Chief Justice of India had reiterated in the open court pronouncement of the judgment today, that 4 separate opinions are there. On the majority of the issues, the court is unanimous. The moot point being that marriage is not a fundamental right. On certain aspects which pertain to the recognition of civil partnership and also the right to adopt for same-sex couples, it's a 3:2. Well, I want to take you through this part of the judgment, which is largely about what the Chief Justice of India has said. CJI on various points, especially on the adoption and the recognition of civil partnership, is in the minority. But many legal experts have argued that for the times to come, this particular part of the judgment will be much talked about because this is a forward-looking one. Well, in this part, you can see the court has argued that it is vested with the authority to hear this case under Article 32. The court has also said that it has the power to issue direction, orders and writs. Let's come to the other part. These are three cases that were cited very often by all the judges today. It includes just case Puttaswamy, the 9-judge case that laid the law of the land in this country, that privacy is a fundamental right. And Shakti Vahini, of course, and Shafeen Jahan is another important case. This is the Hadia case that we're talking about. The Constitution does not expressly recognize the right to marry. An institution cannot be elevated to the realm of a fundamental right based on the content accorded to it by law. However, several facets of the marital relationship are reflection of constitutional values. If you look at the 4 separate opinions that have come out, the most liberal, forward-looking interpretation has been given by the Chief Justice of India, Justice D.Y. Chandrachud. But even the CJI, in his opinion, does not believe that marriage is a fundamental right. It's a statutory right at best. Statutory rights cannot be enforced by the court. It's only the constitutional rights or fundamental rights that can be enforced. Let me cut across to my colleague Ananya Bhatnagar and get more details. Ananya, it's a long judgment. We all will have to spend some hours reading it threadbare, but any particular portion that you want to take the viewers through?
Definitely, Anusha, it is a judgment that runs into almost 366 pages with 4 judges giving out their opinion. But if I take you to page number 81 of the judgment, where a very interesting aspect has been discussed by the chief, and it starts by, is queerness an Indian concept? Who is an Indian? And what practices are Indian? So he starts on by saying that queerness is a natural phenomenon which is known to India since ancient time. The question of whether homosexuality or queerness is unnatural is no longer a recent era. In view of the decision of Amritbir Singh Cheema, where the Supreme Court held that it is innate and natural, the contention of the Union of India that heterosexual unions precede law while homosexual unions do not and cannot be accepted, in view of the decision of Amritbir Singh Cheema, where this court held that queer love has flourished in India since ancient times. He further goes on to say that with respect to sex and negotiating Hijra identity in South India, he also goes on to cite various books and judgments, and a very important part comes at point 84, which is at page 82. Goes on to say that like English language, some English words employed to describe queer identities may have originated in the other countries. However, gender queerness, transgenderism, homosexuality and queer sexual orientations are natural, age-old phenomena which have historically been present in India. They have not been imported from the West. Moreover, if queerness is natural, which it is by the definition impossible for it to be borrowed from another culture or be an initiation of any other culture, is what the Chief Justice of India has gone on to say.
Right. Thank you, Ananya, for bringing us those bits and portions of the judgment. And it's a treat. We must read that judgment. It's going to be quoted, cited, debated upon in the times to come. The dust has not settled for good. That's a given. Let's move on to another bit of exclusive information that we get for you here on The Nation at 5. And this is about the Khalistani sympathisers once again getting a free run. After the kind of backlash and the strain on the diplomatic ties between India and Canada, one would have anticipated that the Canadian authorities would act tough. But it seems like that various Khalistani sympathisers from US, UK have now gathered in Vancouver, and now they are using radio as a propaganda tool to further their contents or whatever the anti-India activities that they have been guilty of. Now, Intel sources have also revealed to News 18 various other details. Let's take you through these pointers one by one. What exactly the story is about. These key elements, they are back to Vancouver from Europe and US. This is where they have gathered together to further their propaganda and further their narrative. Reportedly hired a radio station in Canada, not one but many of them, to further their propaganda. The aim is to radicalize people via radio shows, and of course content mass media tools have always been an important one for them to further their cause. A 2-hour show on Radio Punjab that has been planned. Several Sikhs have voiced their displeasure, and of course we have always pointed out that the Sikh community living in Canada, it's only a very small fraction of people who support this propaganda. Locals have informed the Canadian police that this is a Khalistani propaganda inciting violence which is running on Canadian soil. So far, there is no action that has been taken by the Canadian police. Yet the government has always had a view that this is protected under some kind of freedom of speech and expression. What is it that the sources are revealing to us? Canada continues to shelter terrorists and gangsters. This is a trouble that has been there between the two countries. This is one problem, one issue that has been highlighted multiple times but has not been addressed. Canada also blames other countries for gang war. These are some of them are hardened criminals. Some of them are known to run gangs, which also have offshoots here in India and Punjab. Radio Punjab recordings was seen by the agencies as well. Of course, the Indian agencies are closely monitoring the kind of content and propaganda which is running in Canada or any other part of the world, especially these Khalistani elements. India will share the evidence with Canada and ask them questions as to why they did not act. Sharing of information on radicalization and the India plot. This is something that India will continue to assert with the Canadian authorities. Let's move on. Who is Amritbir Singh Cheema? He hails from Jalandhar in Punjab. He's somebody who's spearheading this propaganda. He's also wanted in many cases in Punjab. He's the one who's responsible for getting all of these anti-India elements or criminal elements together. He has also applied for an asylum in Canada. He's living in Canada since 2015, wanted in multiple cases. He's involved in anti-India activities quite openly. Let me cut across to my colleague Siddhant to get more details and perspective on the story. Siddhant, we've spoken about the strained diplomatic ties between India and Canada, but despite those troubles, it seems like that these elements continue to get a free run on the Canadian soil.
This is the core issue. You know, when government of India talks, they say that the core issue is that how India's most wanted, those who have red corner notices against them, have been issued by federal agencies in India, are roaming freely on Canadian soil. And this is the core issue when it comes to talks on Khalistan with Canada. The core issue is not the killing of Midget. The core issue is that how these people get free access into in Canada, and perhaps they build their empires, they run gurudwaras, they run radio stations. Now what Manoj Gupta is telling us is that this gangster from Jalandhar, he has multiple cases lodged against him. In fact, he is in Canada, Amritbir Singh Cheema, and he could be seen as the new face of the movement. And you know, a lot of Sikhs from Italy, Germany, USA, UK, Vancouver have gathered in Canada for the another Khalistani show.
Okay.
And look, this information is with Manoj Gupta, but and you know, we cannot say that the Canadian authorities are not aware about the antecedents of this person and his intentions. But despite that, there has been no action on him. He is roaming freely. He is running a radio channel. He is spreading propaganda on that against India. He is uniting people under the flag of Khalistan, and no action on him at all. And interestingly, I would also like to mention a point that that nothing has changed. There is a situation of diplomatic standoff. Mr. Trudeau wants to sit privately with the Indian counterparts, but nothing has changed on ground. Yesterday, day before yesterday perhaps, in Surrey, outside Lakshmi Narayan temple, these Khalistani groups blocked the entry of the temple on the first day of Navratri. And there was no cop, there was no security guy from the government who can help the Hindu devotee to enter temples smoothly. So unnecessary provocations, time and again they do, against the Hindu community, and that is how Hindu community is threatened and is constantly living under fear. The Hindu patriotic community, or rather patriotic community in Canada, live under the constant fear of these Khalistani groups.
Siddhant, getting us all that perspective on that exclusive information that has been put out by investigations editor Manoj Gupta. Mr. Hemant Attri, who's a senior journalist, is also joining us on the broadcast. Mr. Attri, one would have anticipated that the antecedents of Cheema are well known to the Canadian authorities, but he's still allowed to run anti-India propaganda.
See, Anushaji, it is in the name of free speech. These things are very, very unfortunate developments. Canada just can't shield these kind of such separatist activists the way it is doing, you know. Even in Pakistan, the safest haven of terrorists on the globe, they have to hide. All these terrorists, they open in, you know, they don't move around in open like the people they are doing in Canada now. But in Canada, many such people are openly doing what they are doing and everybody is watching it. separating activities under Canadian government's patronage and the active eye, this is something very, very unfortunate. See, being a democratic country, they have to understand from the many lessons that they are world around, they can get it. This just can't be and this should not be allowed. Despite all this diplomatic fiasco between Indian government and Canada, they are still doing it. Meaning thereby, either they are helpless or they just don't want to act upon it. Government of India must use this opportunity to exert maximum pressure to stop such kind of anti-India activities there and get these people, all of these people, not one. They should immediately send their dossiers and get them extradited at the earliest possible so that they have to face the law of the land. Whatever follies they have, whatever criminal activities they have done in the country, India, way back 9-10 years back or so, something like that, they have to be brought back and brought to book. Basically, Canadian government has to understand one thing. They can't just, give asylum to such criminals. Ultimately, they are not only against India. If tomorrow some government come and that goes hard on them, they will start all these activities against Canada also. See, basically they are criminals. They are separatists. If they can be against India, why can't they be against Canada? So they have to understand one thing, that these kind of extremist elements, whosoever they are, they have to be sent back to their respective country and they have to be brought to the book. And government of India must exert the fullest pressure while taking benefit of whatever is happening around in Canada and the situation which is prevailing world over. That's the point, Anushaji.
You asserted that India should continue to insist upon its position, and India in fact has dug its heels and said, look, this is not something that India is going to tolerate, the kind of anti-India activities we have seen on Canadian soil. In fact, the diplomatic ties are on an all-time low. What more can India do in terms of maintaining this diplomatic pressure? Is that one thing that we can do? Is it also possible for us to sit across the table with the Canadian authorities, present more evidence, hope for them and hope that they would take some kind of action on it? I'm trying to understand what are the tangibles that India can really pick up.
Very good question, Anushaji. You see, as you rightly pointed out, there is one way of doing it while sitting together and working out certain modalities that such and such people with such and such background, they will not be given any kind of political asylum or citizenship in Canada. That is point number one. That is the best way between two democratic countries. They have to do it in a particular way as per the different conventions world over. Now the second thing is, India being on a driving position as of now, they have recently headed G20 and such a good show was there in India, in the New Delhi. What they can further do is, Prime Minister can use his good office with Mr. Biden also. He can talk to British Prime Minister also and exert pressure, because see, all these extremist activities, they are not only in Canada. Some of them are in US also. Some of them are in Britain also. Some of them are in Australia also. So PM and the different Minister of External Affairs also, they need to speak to all these state of heads and they have to request one thing, that such kind of activities will not be tolerated against India. And this has to be plain speaking. That's the only way.
Absolutely. Thank you, Mr. Atri. I appreciate you taking out time and joining us on the broadcast. Thank you for joining us on The Nation at 5. Now we shift our focus to the war in West Asia, the Israel-Hamas conflict, or the war that has escalated and entered the 10th day. Israel has once again escalated its counter-offensive in the Gaza Strip, and more than 1,600 people have lost their life. There is a humanitarian crisis which is unfolding in the Gaza city. There are blockades which are reported. Also, there are concerns around the civilian life that continue to be lost. Israel has asserted that it has a right to defend itself after the kind of dastardly attack that was carried out by Hamas on the Israeli soil. As far as the country of Israel is concerned, the death toll was very high. More than 1,000 people were affected. There were far more people who were injured onto the kind of strikes and attacks that we saw by Hamas against civilians in Israel. That counter-offensive that continues to mount, we don't know what the end of this conflict will really look like. Let's cut across to some special reports, some reactions on the story.
The attacks in Israel last weekend shocked the world. Over 1,400 people murdered, one by one. Over 3,500 wounded. Almost 200 taken hostage. The elderly, men, women, children, babes in arms, murdered, mutilated, burned alive. We should call it by its name. It was a pogrom. Mr. Speaker, the families of some of the missing are in the public gallery today. We call for the immediate release of all hostages. And I say to them, we stand with you, we stand with Israel.
On Wednesday, President Biden will visit Israel. He's coming here at a critical moment for Israel, for the region, and for the world. The President will reaffirm the United States' solidarity with Israel and our ironclad commitment to its security. President Biden will again make clear, as he's done unequivocally since Hamas's slaughter of more than 1,400 people, including at least 30 Americans, that Israel has the right and indeed the duty to defend its people from Hamas and other terrorists and to prevent future attacks. The President will hear from Israel what it needs to defend its people as we continue to work with Congress to meet those needs.
How would you describe the situation in the city currently?
So right now we have about 4,000 to 5,000 people that stayed in the city. The rest of them have been evacuated and they're living either with family outside of Sderot or in hotels. The government and the city, really, the city is providing for them, making sure that they have everything that they need, from mental health support to clothing and food and provisions and anything that they need. And right now we're trying to take care of also, we have people on the ground from the municipality in every hotel.
The kind of population the city was and the kind of attack that the city had, there's a lot of frustration and anger among the people. There is an Israeli offensive that is going on in Gaza.
Right.
There is also world which is watching Gaza and the humanitarian crisis rising up there. I mean, how would you say, like, you need to finish them off, but at the same time you need to save people who are unnecessarily being killed?
Well, I have a few things to say about that. First, I hope the world is watching. I hope the world is watching, because if the world is watching, then they see that when somebody is behaving the way they did, like the Nazi Germany, then something needs to be done, because back then people were quiet. So that's one. And second, you want to put responsibility on someone, you put it on Hamas. You put it on Hamas, because raising a generation that is like that, not wanting peace and just wanting war, taking all of your funds all the time and putting it into war instead of efforts of peace, that's on you and that's on your head.
People are not very hopeful about how soon the normalcy will return in the city, but they do hope that probably it will take few weeks or few months before the situation could be as safe and secure that people who have fled from the city would be returning back to their home. Meanwhile, the entire city and the perimeter of the city has been taken over by the Israeli Defense Forces, tanks, artilleries being fired, Israeli jets also flying over Gaza and dropping ammunition or missiles targeting Hamas locations. Of damage to the civilian population in Palestine, and about 2,400 or more than that will be swiftly shifting towards the humanitarian crisis that is emerging in the Gaza Strip because of the number of casualties that has been going on there, humanitarian crisis that has emerged, food supplies shortage, medical supplies shortage, doctors having been killed, children having been killed. So the gory images of Israeli, Israeli tragedy are quickly being reported in Gaza Strip, and that is where the balance of geopolitics remains. We'll have to see whether the Israeli offensive will continue on the Gaza Strip or the diplomacy will take center stage, and there will.
Well, we'll continue tracking that story and much more here on The Nation at 5. For now, slipping into a very short break. Stay tuned, stay with us.
Brought to you by
cars burned. Behind me you could see there was a police station that used to be here, and what is left of this police station is all that a small puddle of water and rubbles. Those were removed from the site just days before. Now the entire city, it looks ghostly. The cars that were attacked, and they were actually totally damaged. People at home shot dead. It was a day of rest. People are not very hopeful about how soon the normalcy will return in the city, but they do hope that probably it will take few weeks or few months before the situation could be as safe and secure that people who have fled from the city would be returning back to their home. Meanwhile, the entire city and the perimeter of the city has been taken over by the Israeli Defense Forces, tanks, artilleries being fired, Israeli jets also flying over Gaza and dropping ammunition or missiles targeting Hamas locations. 2,400 or more than that people in Palestine, in Gaza, they have also been killed. Swiftly shifting towards the humanitarian crisis that is emerging in the Gaza Strip because of the number of casualties that has been going on there, humanitarian crisis that has emerged, food supplies shortage, medical supplies shortage, doctors having been killed, children having been killed. So the gory images of Israeli, Israeli tragedy, and that is where the balance of geopolitics remains. We'll have to see whether the Israeli offensive will continue on the Gaza Strip or the diplomacy will take center stage, and there will. We are in Zeroth, and this was the place which was worst hit during the 7th October terrorist attack by Hamas people. We are joined by Erith, and she will explain the kind of situation that is currently in city. Okay, so first to just give you some idea, we are still standing on the splattered blood remains, and this is a safe house that was probably also attacked, and many people were dragged out of this house and killed summarily. So Elith, how would you describe the situation in the city currently?
So right now we have about 4,000 to 5,000 people that stayed in the city. The rest of them have been evacuated, and they're living either with family outside of Sderot or in hotels. The government and the city is providing for them, making sure that they have everything that they need, from mental health support to clothing and food and provisions and anything that they need. And right now we're trying to take care of also, we have people on the ground from the municipality in every hotel and trying to see if there are any needs that come up, and whatever people need, we're taking care of.
So we know that on 7th of October there was total rampage and mayhem that was done by the terrorists.
Right.
I mean, if you could describe how the situation in the town on that day, how did it all
So what
all
happened
start?
that day?
Yes,
So really, at 6 o'clock in the morning, sirens went off, and when sirens go off, people hear no to go into the shelters. Because it was a holiday, people were supposed to be walking, to synagogues that morning, and it's a Saturday. But because of the sirens, people weren't on the streets, thankfully, because the minute that happened, we had a few jeeps. I do not know if it was 3 or 4 jeeps, heavily equipped with military and equipment, guns, explosives, you name it, and they just went through town, through the main street, and then they separated into a few streets. One of them came to the police station that we see the remainings of right here, and they took over the police station, and the rest of them were just going around town and killing anyone that they could. Anyone. People were shot in their cars. There was a minibus here with people that were going on a trip for the day. They shot all of them, all 13 people in the cars. They were just running around trying to kill people as they go. The minute the police was able to do something, they did. The minute our security team, the minute they heard anything, gunshots, whatever that was, they put their gear on and they went to the streets to actually look for these terrorists and to have some kind of a face-to-face with them so they can finish them off. But it was brutal. They came very prepared. They knew exactly what they were doing, and the minute they got a hold of the police station, they got the higher ground, and there was a sniper or 2 snipers on the top of the building, and they were really killing anybody around you. Now you can see this is a populated area, so people were stuck in their homes.
Elith, how many hours it took the security forces actually before they could take control of the city entirely?
So it took a long time, because you have to understand the army was surprised as well, and the army was on fighting the front line of the kibbutzim and the moshavim right there. So really in Sderot, by the time we got the help and by the time we got a hold of the situation, roughly 36 hours, which is a very long time to be home and scared. I got a lot of calls from people calling me and saying there are gunshots by my window, there are gunshots in the streets, not knowing if it's soldiers or if it's Hamas. So it was very, very scary.
With the kind of city and the situation, how soon do you think the city can go back to normal, people can come back and they will live?
Listen, I'm not a prophet and I have no idea what the government is planning. I do know one thing, that the mayor of the city is already planning ahead, and they understand that in order for us to be able to recover, The minute the military operation ends, we have to be prepared for our people. And we're going to do anything and everything that we need to in order to do that. So we're raising funds right now to be able to rebuild our homes. There's so many homes that have been hit, about 74 direct hits into people's homes. Some people have nowhere to go back to, right? So we're going to be able to rebuild it. We're going to be able to give them what they need when it comes to mental health professionals that are in town, anything and everything. And right now they're getting ready for that. So the minute we'll know that the operation or the war is over, then we can start with the recovery piece.
A few days.
We don't know. I think everybody's kind of preparing us for at least a month. Yeah.
So thank you, Eric, for talking
you
to
very
us.
much.
And it may take probably few months before situation would go back to normal. And situation has been pretty bad. We have seen all around the city, the blood-soaked streets, houses, they have been left like that, cars burned. Behind me you could see there was a police station that used to be here. And what is left of this police station is all that a small puddle of water and rubbles. Those were removed from the site, just days before. Now the entire city, it looks ghostly. The cars that were attacked and they were actually, totally damaged. People at home shot dead. It was a day of rest. People are not very hopeful.
Welcome back, and let's cut across to some latest news coming in, and this is coming in from Pakistan-occupied Kashmir, where the Pakistan Army continues to face massive protests over rising electricity bills, fuels and various civic amenities which are denied to the civilian population. Top government sources are revealing to News 18 that Pakistan right now is unable to provide the basic necessities and amenities for the individuals, for the people living in Pakistan-occupied Kashmir. And these kind of protests have been witnessed even earlier. I want to cut across to my colleague Siddhant and get more details on the story. Siddhant, tell us more.
Well, yes, that's right. So this is Pak-occupied Jammu and Kashmir, and situation is not stable. I'm talking about the situation of governance. So there's a lot of crisis in this entire area with regard to slapping of blasphemy cases against some of the activists in the region. Then also rising electricity bills, fuels, and floor prices. Have made people come out of their houses to protest against the government. Now it's time perhaps to draw a parallel between two Kashmir. There's one Kashmir of India where the situation is improving with each passing day. Infrastructure is being built. The government schemes people are getting benefits from the government schemes. Law and order is in place. Less terror strikes. On the other hand, this illegally Pak-occupied Kashmir, where there are so much problems, so many crises, that these activists, they are going to the government offices and perhaps they are telling the officers, the netas there, that we want to merge with India, because if you cannot provide basic amenities to people, if you cannot provide free ration, if you cannot provide cheap electricity and fuel, then what is the point of staying with Pakistan? So that is perhaps the narrative which is existing within the people of Pak-occupied Kashmir. Also, people in Pak-occupied Kashmir know this very well, that the government of Pakistan spends a lot of money making bombs, missiles, and in the defense sector. A very less amount from the budget is spent on the upliftment of people in education, in medical, in the basic amenities. And the anger is also because they see through social media, through news channels, that how India is growing, how India is progressing, and they see that they are deprived of taking benefits of those government schemes, the infra projects that are being done by India, only because they have been illegally occupied by Pakistan. So this echo is growing, this voice is growing, and the result is that the activists in that region are being framed in false blasphemy cases. They are being put behind bars so that they don't raise voice against the government of POK.
Absolutely, Siddhant. And as you pointed out, this is not the first time that protests of this nature have happened in Pak-occupied Kashmir. This has been a burning issue in this particular part of the region, how the government and the establishment has been unable to provide the basic amenities that the citizens deserve. And the visuals tell you that entire story as to how it's really panning out. Our investigations editor Manoj Gupta getting us that exclusive bit of information, and my colleague Siddhant breaking it down for you. We continue to track all the voices here on The Nation at 5. For now, that's a wrap from my end. Thank you so much for watching.
Welcome everyone. Thanks a lot for staying with us. You're watching Plain Speak with me, Shivani Gupta. The Hamas attack on Israel and its unarmed civilians on October 7 was the deadliest day for Jews anywhere in the world since the Second World War. Since then, the Israeli offensive against Hamas based in Gaza has also become the deadliest of the 5 Israel-Gaza wars for both sides. The total